It's a story we all know. A man heard a warning no one else could hear. The rain was coming. Enough rain to end the world. So he built a boat. The story spends a lot of time on the flood itself. It spends almost no time on the years before it, the decades of building, what it was like to be the only person in town who believed the sky was preparing to release a flood that would cover the entire earth. His neighbors laughed at him. Of course they laughed, until it started raining and didn't stop. Noah was just a madman with a boat. Last fall, I stood on 240 acres in the Minnesota wilderness and watched a man dig a lake around an island with a shelter underneath it big enough for 50 people to live comfortably. I asked him why, and he told me about the nights he lies awake, wondering the same thing. His voice has been augmented to protect his identity and will be throughout the episode.
Sometimes I'll be home at night wondering, why in the heck am I doing this? Why am I spending all this money to do something like this? Because sometimes I feel like it's out of control. For whatever reason, God's blessed me. I mean, all the bad things I've done in my life, I've done a lot of bad things. Why am I chosen to do this? And sometimes I feel like this is kind of stupid. I don't really feel this way, but it's crossed my mind. It's like, what, am I like Noah? Like Noah's Ark? Is God having me build this for a reason?
This is Suspicious Minds, AI in the Apocalypse, Decameron Days, Part 2. Thus far, we've explored the history of bunkers and traced the underlying ideology of bunkerism to contemporary Silicon Valley and the philosophies surrounding artificial intelligence. Now, I want to spend more time on the psychological implications of bunker culture. Not only what this says about the people loading up on guns and astronaut food, but what we can learn about the anxieties and fears of this current moment, particularly how they relate to emergent technology and, as we'll get into, our conceptions of modern masculinity. This is a particularly visual episode, and as of the last 2 weeks, we now have a video version of the show on Apple Podcasts. So I recommend checking out the video as long as you're not driving or out for a run or something equally as unsafe. There's a lot to look at in this one. And by the way, as long as you're on your podcast app, give us a follow or a rating. It helps. As a heads up, this episode was pretty deep into doomsday bunkers and might feel a little different from our other episodes. But I promise we circle back to artificial intelligence and apocalyptic thinking and how these things affect the human mind. But to really connect all that from the jump before we take this detour, guess who else is talking about bunkers these days? Our good friend, Sam Altman.
A lot of these guys have bunkers. Zucky has a bunkie. I know that somewhere out in Hawaii. People have bunkers. Do you have a bunker?
I have underground concrete heavy reinforced basements, but I don't have anything I would call a bunker.
Hold on, dude. Look, I'll let you keep me on the ropes in a lot of this conversation, but I am going to call that out as a dang bunker, dude. Sam, that's a bunker.
What's the difference between a basement and a bunker?
A place you could hide when it all goes off or whatever.
I know. Yeah, I have been thinking I should really do a good version of one of those, but
Okay.
I don't have what I would call a bunker, but it has been on my mind.
Wow. Okay. If he's considering building a bunker, or maybe already has one, it's kind of unclear. Maybe we should all be thinking about this. When we left off at the end of our last episode, bunker author Bradley Garrett had just confessed something. The academic who wrote the book on bunkers told us he'd gone through a radical personal transformation. He drank the Kool-Aid, in his words. In our conclusion to this 2-part episode, we find out what was in the cup. It starts, as so many of these stories do, in March of 2020.
I stopped at home for Christmas. Then COVID happened. I had no furniture. I had no clothing. I had no possessions at all. I had a suitcase. And I'm holding my book and thinking, oh my God, okay, I need to go back through it and through my notes and try and figure out what I missed here. And it was so glaringly obvious. There were these quotes that I had in my notes from people telling me a pandemic comes around about every 150 years. It's like clockwork. We're overdue for a pandemic.
The researcher who spent years embedded with preppers got caught by the very thing they had warned him about. It was interesting talking to Bradley about this because he truly thought these people were crazy until all of a sudden they weren't, much like Noah and his neighbors.
As an ethnographer, as a researcher, it really put me in my place because I was writing things down, but I wasn't listening. So I've gone through this radical transformation since the book came out. I left cities. I moved out to the Mojave Desert. I bought 5 acres. I'm moving towards self-sufficiency. And I am more prepared than most people at this point for the next crisis. And it's not going to be a pandemic, but something is coming around the corner inevitably. And whatever that is, I'm going to put myself in the best position I can be for it.
I want to stay on something Bradley learned from one of the people he studied, a man named Robert Vicino, who bought a massive bunker in the UK. Because it's the best description of prepping I've probably ever heard.
He described it to me as an ark, which I thought was hilarious and kind of interesting. But he was like, but this ark, it doesn't pass through space. It passes through time. It makes sense, right? You stockpile yourself to build a bridge to get through a period of time, and you hope that when you get on the other side, you're going to be in a relatively good position to be able to rebuild or help other people. So there's almost something altruistic about it.
An arc that doesn't pass through space. It passes through time. Noah built for 40 days of rain. There's some debate over the correct amount of time to plan for, but modern preppers build for what they believe is the time of chaos they'll need to endure.
Every prepper has their baseline. And the 3-day mark is actually what most people work on. You have enough to get you through a short period of time until help arrives. And since I returned to the United States, it's become more and more clear to me that help probably isn't coming in a disaster. We've spent decades hacking at the social safety net in this country, and our infrastructure is falling apart. Emergency services aren't going to show up potentially if things get really bad. So I'm trying to buy myself enough time that I can totally reconfigure my life and the way I'm thinking about things. So 3 months seems like enough time to me that if things get really bad, by that time I'm thinking about growing food or whatever, which is hard to do out here.
The shape of the vessel changes, and the duration someone will have to stay in it is never quite the same. But the need for a shelter to escape the flood is consistent across time. And Bradley's personal version of the ark might surprise you, because it isn't a missile silo, not even close. It's a neighborhood.
We're hanging out all the time. Bonfires are absolutely happening. We're definitely close. When we go on holiday, we look after each other's houses. This is a kind of neo-tribalism that people think, we can build the community we want with our neighbors in our communities. First, I'm going to take care of myself and my family, and then my neighbors, and then my community. And then if there's anything left, I can stretch out from there. The thing about where I moved is everyone's a prepper up here because you have to be. We're all on 5 acres in the middle of the desert, and we have to share resources. We have to share equipment. We have to share knowledge. Now we're in a position where we could block our road. We could band together with our neighbors. We're all armed, and we just stop people from coming up here completely and maintain self-sufficiency. So I'm not worried about my neighbors. And most of the preppers that I speak to these days, that's their thinking too, is you need to rely on your neighbors. The only way you're going to make it through something like that is if you have a strong community and you have a strong sense of who you can rely on. The idea that you're going to go it alone in your backyard bunker and then pop out of that in a good situation is just, it doesn't really make sense anymore, in my opinion. If I'm thinking about my family and our neighbors around us, the better prepared everyone is, the longer we can all go in an emergency before things take a dark turn. I'm always trying to rally the neighbors, let's fix the roads. Let's have an emergency evacuation plan. Let's figure out how we pop these county water tanks if we need them that I'm staring at out of my window. Let's think about these things. And that's what prepping is. Basically, it's a speculative thought experiment. If this happens, then what do we do? that's become my role in the community as an expert on prepping, is to say, okay, so I've learned all of this stuff in the course of writing this book. Let me tell you what I've learned. And then, we can all decide as a community whether we want to act on that information or not.
5 acres and a bonfire. Bradley's Ark costs about what a used truck costs if you buy in the right spot. So it was interesting because I was talking to Bradley just to hear his expertise on spending so much time with so many other preppers and on bunkers and underground spaces. I truly wasn't expecting that I was going to get a bit of a twofer in the sense that I was interviewing an expert and a prepper. It was really cool. And I loved how he was doing it in a way that pretty much anybody could do if you're willing to just make a couple sacrifices. Maybe not even. In the tradition of American prepping, this idea of community prepping is kind of a radical one. As we discussed in the last episode, there's this myth of the frontiersman and the self-reliant survivalists that are part of the American fabric that exist in opposition to this kind of thinking. Remember, the American government made an ideological decision that we the people would be left to fend for ourselves in an all-out nuclear war because collective responsibility is something too close to communism, and we'd rather die in a nuclear winter than accept that. I just kind of can't get over this. This is the conspiracy, a plan in which our collective fate was decided by those in charge as they made wholly separate plans to save themselves. We could do a whole episode on the bunkers that the government built for themselves. There's this writer, Garrett Graff, who wrote a really good book called Raven Rock that goes into some of these bunkers and the plans that were made. We'll link to it in the show notes. But enough on that. There's a version of prepping I'd like to introduce you to. A different version. A very different version. If Bradley's version is to pool resources and create a prepped community free from what we think of as bunkers, this other version is at the most extreme opposite end of the bunkering spectrum that you can possibly imagine.
Because the hottest trend is billionaire survivalist bunkers. Only 2 things in life are certain: death and taxes, and billionaires have figured out how to cheat both. Mark Zuckerberg. Zuck has bought up a chunk of land in Hawaii and is building a Bond villain compound where his family can see out the apocalypse, costing $100 million, featuring 2 mansions joined by a tunnel which branches off into an underground bunker. So, if you wish for all billionaires to be 6 feet under, you should have been more specific. And Zuck's bunker is not even the weirdest. Billionaires are now building fortresses with fiery moats and water cannons. Well, water cannons only make sense. You're going to need something to put out your moat. And this right here, by the way, is not a screenshot from Minecraft. That is an actual rendering of an actual compound being built by Doom Bunker developer and man hinting with his eyes where he's going to put that thumb. Al Corby, who brags, "We wound up literally building a 30-foot deep lake around the compound, skimmed with a lighter-than-water flammable liquid that can transform into a ring of fire. And it burns, 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 the ring of fire."
Al Corby spent 3 decades of his life designing security for the Department of Justice, protecting the people who protect the country and gaming out disaster scenarios for them. Al's actually a really fun guy to talk to because he will tell you the darkest stuff you've ever heard in a way that makes you laugh a lot. And for the last several decades, he and his wife, Naomi, have run a company called SAFE, which designs fortified estates for people whose names you'd know and whose addresses you could never find out. The scale of their work is hard to picture, so I'll let Al describe it for you.
The same year that one of my clients spent $103 million on his security for his one estate, that same year, Oprah gave us $1,500 to harden a townhouse in Chicago, and we gave her $200 back. So, you're looking at $1,300 all the way out to $103 million, both being very, very effective at what they did.
One of Al's current projects is the property I visited last fall, 240 acres. The client, we're not going to name him, of course, grew up in the only house in his town without running water. And now he's building one of the most elaborate and secure private shelters on Earth. And we, shockingly, were granted access to it. Al, in fact, said it is the single most secure doomsday bunker that exists, and that it can survive a nuclear blast from as close as 1 mile away and house 50 people for up to 30 years with absolutely no assistance from the outside world. If you haven't pieced this together yet, this is the bunker island from the Colbert clip. And it's unlike anything I've seen before, ever, truly. Like when Colbert calls it Minecraft, this looks like real life Minecraft. And the wildest part of this story actually isn't any of that. It's how it all started. It started, like many things, with jet skis.
So I'm saying, gosh, if you like to jet ski that much, well, why don't we just make a moat? You know, we'll just dig a moat and we'll have a little island out in the middle of the moat. Okay, we'll build a moat. The moat, the 20-foot moat, wound up becoming a 150-foot moat, 30 feet deep. So all of a sudden, it was a lake. And you don't dig a lake with bobcats. The dozers and the trucks are too big to be on the highway. They have to put them on flatbeds and bring them in. 3 of them. I mean, this is like a public works project. But then there's the obvious, right? What are you going to do with all this dirt? Oh, wait a minute. We could use a mountain. We're going to put the mountain around the perimeter of the property.
A moat that became a lake. A pile of dirt that became a mountain. And on the lake, one more feature, water cannons sourced from Sweden that lock onto jet skis for what I can only describe as combat recreation.
The cannons will lock onto the jet skis. So while you're out there playing flag jet ski, trying to get your buddy's flag off his jet ski, the cannons are shooting you off your jet skis.
The water cannons actually do serve a purpose, by the way. They lock on, meaning have autonomous targeting for the jet skis and can knock you off a jet ski in a way that probably isn't super pleasant, but is fun, like a giant super soaker with automatic aiming. But what they're really for is knocking Apache helicopters. I kid you not. The water cannons can autonomously lock onto Apache helicopters and knock them out of the sky. Because, you know, having your compound attacked by Apache helicopters is apparently a thing that happens to some people. Like, really, this has happened to some of Al's clients before. And yes, they survived.
One of the asides of the water cannon, imagine, July, hot out, you're having a barbecue and everything. The water cannons can go like this, and they can make rainbows for you. So, I mean, you just...
What more do you want, right?
A rainbow in July.
A rainbow. The symbol God sent Noah to promise the flood would never come again. This one is made by defensive water cannons. I'm not going to unpack that because I'm not sure I really can. So I'm just going to leave it there. Something for you to think about. But here's the thing you need to understand about the man at the center of this. He is not building a novelty. He's also not building for a flood. He's building against a very specific nightmare.
I didn't build it with the intentions for nuclear warfare. My scenario is an EMP. All power's gone. People turn the water on. No water. 99% of people probably have supplies in their house to maybe last 3-4 days, maybe a week. So what's going to happen after that when people go to the grocery stores and there's no groceries? I'll be self-sufficient. I'll have a hydroponics room, endless amounts of water, and endless amounts of food and air. And I'll be protected from anybody trying to penetrate into here.
An EMP, an electromagnetic pulse from a weapon, a solar flare, or, a rogue AI agent that takes down the electrical grid. There are a lot of people who share this fear. The EMP is something because we're kind of overdue for one. There's this thing called the Carrington event. So you can click on the show notes, but here's the quick and dirty version. In September 1859, a British astronomer named Richard Carrington was sketching sunspots when he saw a blast of white light erupt off the surface of the sun. About 17 hours later, the sky appeared very strange. Auroras, commonly known as the Northern Lights, appeared over Cuba, over Hawaii. This doesn't usually happen. Miners in the Rockies woke up and started making breakfast because it was so bright out they thought it was morning. And the telegraph, the only commonly used electronic communication technology on Earth at that time, essentially blew up. Like, all the telegraphs. Operators were knocked off their feet by sparking equipment. Some stations caught fire, burning the operators' fingers. Others reported they could disconnect their batteries and keep sending messages from the power of the electricity falling out of the sky. That was the Carrington event, the largest solar storm in recorded history, hitting a planet whose entire grid was a few thousand miles of telegraph wire. This will happen again. We are truly overdue. The sun does this every century or two. And a smaller storm in 2012, a year of many apocalypse predictions, actually missed the Earth's orbit by about 9 days. Only when this happens again, it won't hit telegraph wires. It'll hit everything. The device you're listening to this on won't work. Some people think airplanes might actually fall from the sky. All electronic communication will cease immediately. This will be unlike anything the modern world has experienced. And this really freaks a lot of people out, including me, if I'm being honest. And for clarity, the Carrington event was a natural solar flare. It occurred from the sun. An EMP could also be caused by something like a nuclear warhead going off near satellites in space, or a number of other factors, or just a rogue AI agent that gets into the system and decides to start taking things down. For most of this conversation, the end of the world is not a fireball. It is a power outage that doesn't end. Where did this fear come from? Because God didn't tell him an EMP is coming. No, the fear is from what other people will do in such a scenario. It's a fear of other people, and that fear actually has a pretty benign origin story in a typically quiet, gated community.
That was a huge thing for me when that home invasion was a couple houses down from me. 3 assailants came in, they busted the man door in the garage, they walked in, come across an elderly couple, tied them up, blindfolded them, gagged them, and went through their whole house, putting guns to their head. That reaffirmed my decision of what I'm doing. And that's just normal times, peacetime.
But the bunker isn't his only protection from the things that keep him up at night. He's also looking to the sky for protection at the same time that he scans it for threats.
I will have a perimeter detection to where a drone will automatically come out of its own cubicle that stays charged on the roof, and that drone will fly to that area wherever it was detected and video them, and I'll be able to see it live time. I could shoot pepper spray at them if I wanted to from the drone. I could shoot hard steel balls at them.
Yeah, Al showed us a drone, a video with a drone recently that the drone has gunpowder in it. Mm-hmm. And so it actually, like, the drone can face ID somebody and basically burrow into their head and explode. It's like a sniper. It's like a drone sniper.
Yeah, I don't think that's legal.
Yeah, I don't think that's legal either. But these exist. They are called kamikaze drones, and human-operated FPV kamikaze drones are transforming warfare in real time in the war in Ukraine. We'll show this in a second here if you're watching, and if you're listening, you'll just have to hear the kamikaze drone and then click down in the show notes if you want to look at a YouTube video showing this stuff. It's crazy.
With artillery in short supply and Russian forces making breakthroughs, FPV drones are becoming Ukraine's best hope for combating Russia's vast fleets of tanks, armored personnel carriers, and other components of Putin's war machine.
Stop! Super!
We saw firsthand how they're also used to pick off individual Russian soldiers.
В цьому районі? В кущі в полі чи трішки правіше? Зараз візерись. Трішки правіше візьме.
Back to my conversation with our prepper. Like, have you thought about psychologically what that would be like if the worst happens and there is civil unrest and you have to kill somebody on your property? Like, the weight of...
It would be terrible. I mean, I don't want to kill anybody, but kill or be killed. That's the only way I would ever kill anybody. The whole setup is to avoid that. But if it ever were to get to there, I'm set up for that too. And hopefully that will never, there's things that I have that hopefully I'll never have to use.
He's, of course, talking about his flaming moat, water cannons, various landmines, autonomous projectiles, and the room he has with the trash compactor-style closing walls. You know, like that famous scene from Star Wars.
The walls are Don't just stand there, try and brace it with something!
He assured us that this whole setup is designed so that he never has to hurt anyone. Which brings us to the tunnel, the only way in. And again, I need to remind you of something before you hear this. This is a show about artificial intelligence. Like, when I saw this thing, it's really intimidating. It feels like you're pulling up to the gates of Jurassic Park, only behind the gate, there's a whole bunch of AI and other tech and walls that can shoot at you if they detect you, and a swimming pool that can dump water on your head and trap you in a tunnel and drown you, and all kinds of other like horrific ways to die instead of raptors and a T-Rex.
The bollards pop up, so now they can't go forward, they can't go backwards. The best they can do is get out of their car. Oh, you'll appreciate this. The tunnel is one of the first adaptations of AI security. The tunnel will talk to you. It will take you through scenarios. It will be polite to you and ask you to leave. If you say no, even the flames will start low before they build up. So it'll give you plenty of time to turn around and go away. So it's layered security with a very bad ending if you want to get, no one's going to go there.
The tunnel will talk to you. It will be polite. And if you don't listen, it escalates. Gas, flames, a hydraulic ceiling, a human-sized microwave. In our last episode, Emily Ray worried about handing life and death decisions to machines. Here, that theory has been poured in concrete out front of a man-made lake in the American Midwest. Imagined things have a way of becoming real, much, much faster than we can predict. That's kind of why we're having this whole conversation about AI right now. We did not think we would be here this quickly. Before we leave the tunnel, I need you to hear the other thing Al told me, because the man who has spent 50 years building perfect walls has noticed something about the newest threat.
For 50 years, SAFE has been able to protect you against everything and anything short of the Earth tipping off its axis. Technology has allowed SAFE to be able to create the most protective environments imaginable. Bunker busters, doesn't matter what's happening, we can protect you if you have the financial wherewithal. Okay. All of a sudden, there was a new crack in the armor, AI. And we realized SAFE can't protect you against AI.
The best walls money can buy, and the newest threat doesn't care about walls. Sam Altman, by the way, was asked a question about bunkers and AGI, and his response is telling. Here we go. Quote, "None of this is going to help if AGI goes wrong. This is a ridiculous question." End quote. So, that's comforting. Al does have a plan for protecting clients against AI, by the way. I don't want to misrepresent his abilities, mostly because I don't want him to kill me, but that's something we'll get to later on this season. And one more thing about the man building all of this, the prepper himself. I asked him if he ever regretted starting and spending this insane amount of money building this fortress.
None whatsoever. There's nothing I would rather be doing. Nothing. On a blueprint, it's a lot smaller, so it's a little bit bigger than I thought it was going to be. I mean, this room, that ain't big enough, and this game room, this is not going to be big enough. And then now I'm like, this is big.
There's nothing he would rather be doing. Hold on to that. Because the joy is not a side effect. The joy, it turns out, might be the whole point. More on that after the break. If the Lake Project is what one visionary, albeit very paranoid man builds for his family, there's also a market for those who'd rather just buy in and not do all this work themselves, put all this thought into it. Bradley visited the flagship of one such community, and it's almost cutely called the Survival Condo.
One of the things that was so weird to me is when I went to the Survival Condo in Kansas. It's probably the most elaborate and, I mean, it's almost luxurious, this bunker. Of all the bunkers I've seen, it's the most comfortable, most expensive, most incredible place I've ever seen. And it's built inside an Atlas F missile silo. It's 200 feet deep. And this guy bought it, Larry Hall, and he turned it into like a subterranean condominium complex. And he's selling half floors in there for, I think, $500,000 and then a full floor for $3 million. But he bought it from the government for $300,000. I think he put $10 million into it, made $30 million in the first year. It felt exactly like Fallout. Like Larry Hall is Vault Tech. And I keep trying to explain this to people. I'm like, it's not science fiction. It's not a video game. This exists, right? You can go there. You can buy space in there if you have the money.
If you're not a gamer, here's what you need to know. Fallout is a video game series, and now also a hit TV show, set in a retro-futuristic America that didn't survive a nuclear war. Before the bombs fell, a cheerful corporation called Vault Tech sold spaces in underground luxury vaults to anyone who could afford one.
Friends, your future may not be as secure as you think. Where will you be when the atomic bombs fall? You can secure your family's future by reserving a spot in a state-of-the-art underground vault from Vault Tech.
The pitch was survival. The vaults were real, but the company's motives were not exactly what the brochure said. Ron Perlman has been the iconic voice of these games since the first installment 30 years ago, when he uttered the now legendary phrase, war. War never changes.
War. War never changes. The Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth. Spain built an empire from its lust for gold and territory.
Huh. This seems very familiar. Apocalypse. Apocalypse never changes. There's something there. Anyway, back to Bradley.
He's got like 57 residents. He sold out immediately when he built this thing. And I asked him, how many have been here? And he said, I don't know, 10, maybe. Like most people were just writing him checks and saying, you know, make sure it's ready if I need it. But they actually never came to live there, to test it out, to meet the people that they would be living with in the bunker, which is insane, right? Like
57 residents. Maybe 10 have ever seen it. They're not buying a shelter, not really. They're buying a feeling. And the feeling is so valuable that Bradley found people selling it without the shelter attached. That's right, bunkers that were fully paid for and did not exist. So what is the feeling? Al Corby has spent 5 decades selling it, from $1,300 townhouses to $103 million estates, and he can name it precisely. It's not fear of the disaster itself. It's fear of what your neighbor becomes on day 4 after the collapse. I mean, we've all seen The Purge, right?
You are a good man. You are a respectful person. You love your family. You wouldn't do anything wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen when I've got the water, I've got the food, and I've got the medication, and you don't? What are you going to do?
Yeah, good people will be forced to become bad people.
No, say it. What are you going to do?
Yeah, take it from someone.
Do you see, that's the point. So you've got good people doing bad things, and that's a condition you can't do anything about if you're not prepared. If you're prepared, you can.
Good people doing bad things. The flood, in every version of this story, is other people. And that idea, what it does to a mind, and why some minds run towards it, is where we go next. Maybe prepping and building bunkers is a really important and really logical thing to be doing. I don't know. But there's also something very attractive about it, even if it's not super rational. It's also very alluring to one specific segment of the population. And I want to know why. I spoke with Casey Kelly, professor of rhetoric and public culture at the University of Nebraska, and an author of an incredibly insightful book about the psychology of prepping, appropriately titled Apocalypse Man. He makes a compelling case about prepping and its relationship to modern masculinity. So why is the book Apocalypse Man? Is prepping mostly a male activity?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple of reasons that we might see that. Part of the reason to prep is we need to, first of all, prepare for a world where traditional things that kept society together have collapsed. And so the assumption then that traditional male authority is what's fundamentally in jeopardy kind of maybe explains why doomsday prepping's attraction to certain men makes a lot of sense if they believe that the traditional, like, sort of patriarchal structure of society is imminently in danger of collapse. I think the second component of it is that this goes all the way back to the Vietnam War. There's a really fantastic book called Warrior Dreams by James Gibson. And in it, what he talks about is like the kind of apocalypse in some ways that Vietnam signified for a lot of men, which is that the traditional idea of the soldier, which was like an iconic masculine archetype, because of our strategic loss in that conflict and its unpopularity, kind of eroded that archetype of the soldier. And in its place then came a paramilitary culture that was trying to like avenge that loss. If you think about Rambo just wanting his country to love him as much as he loves his country, it is sort of the demand to recover and reclaim masculinity because of its kind of the impending apocalyptic demise. And so I think those two kind of elements maybe explain why, like, doomsday prepping, while it's not exclusively a male activity, does have a particular kind of masculinity associated with it.
Do you think they're almost hoping for the collapse to restore the other order, and that's why they're prepping? Like, what is happening there on a psychological level?
You wonder to what extent that one would gain a sort of sense of self-satisfaction in having accurately predicted the end of the world and been one of the rare ones who was actually prepared for it. I think that some people prepare under the assumption that they believe that it's the best way to ensure their health and safety. But I do think that there probably are those who prepare in such a way that there's a kind of like anxious desire, an ambivalent desire for that world to happen. There's a sense that maybe the world will be set right. Because apocalypse, in terms of like the end of the world, its original definition when it comes from like a religious scripture is revelation. So the end of the world could mean the end of the world as we know it and the entry into another kind of world. So there's might be a desire to like say that we'll be the heirs to a new world that will reset things to the way I want them to be set, right? I want to live in a world that's reorganized around tribalism, and in seeing through everything, you kind of have a sense of mastery over the, contingency and uncertainty of just managing the future. I think the other could be a giddy desire for a new world where the world is set back to an order that you believe to be fundamentally correct.
So it's the idea of nostalgia that we will go back to something else instead of forward into something we've never seen. A deep nostalgia for an imagined past that manifests in obsessing over the end of the world. But nostalgia doesn't explain the man with the flaming moat. He isn't cosplaying Rambo. He lies awake at night, asking whether he's crazy or whether he's been chosen. For that, I want to go to Dr. Joel Gold, because when I described this lake project to him, he went straight to a very different movie than anything we've discussed.
It puts me in mind of this great movie, Take Shelter. Yeah. This notion of a man, he has these dreams of a coming apocalyptic storm and starts building a bunker. He's wrestling himself with this notion of, am I going crazy? And yet I feel compelled to build this bunker. At the end, you see the storm coming, but even then you're not entirely sure that it's real or whether it's an hallucination. Where does being wisely protective end and some form of paranoia begin?
Where does being wisely protective end and paranoia begin? That's the $103 million bunker question. I want to be careful here because it would be easy, I guess, and it has been easy for late night hosts and other people on the internet to make a man with a modern day moat into a punchline. But I stood on this guy's property. I met his family. And the truthful answer is he's one of the warmest, most generous people I met this entire season. Al Corby has a framing for this that I think about a lot.
When I was a kid, we looked up to success. We looked up to knowledge. Somehow we've gotten to the point that we now vilify. How in the world could you ever say anything negative about a person, in this case the client, right? Whose focus is on protecting his family. A father protecting his family. And we've somehow made it a late night joke.
So if it isn't madness, and if it isn't a joke, what is it? I want to bring this discussion of bunkers and preppers to a close by looping back to a psychological theory we discussed earlier this season, Freud's death drive. Casey Kelly will give us a quick refresher on exactly what that is.
The death drive was something that in the work of Freud, he identified as something that escaped his understanding of the pleasure principle. What he observed in the death drive is that it's not a desire for death per se, but it's that we are constantly trying to stage an encounter with an original loss. Whenever we repeat unpleasant experiences, they don't seem to make sense, because why would we want to undo ourselves in that way? We repeat these experiences that are negative, but so that we can master those experiences. But we never can really master them. We can only sort of change our relationship to them. Now, what does any of this have to do with doomsday prepping? It's not that there's a desire for death, but that there is this repeated rumination and obsession with the breakdown and collapse of all things. Doomsday preppers, they'll be constantly on the lookout for all the signs, right, that everything is about to collapse. And in doing so, they're constantly sort of repeating this like negative, unbinding kind of experience, right? Like to just like face death continually, stage an encounter with death and destruction and mayhem over and over and over again. What do they gain by simulating the death of everything? In that simulation is a sense that we can master it. Instead of a passive posture to it, we can have an active posture to it. Does it stop the end of the world from coming? No. Does it bring about the end of the world? No, but it does change our relationship to the anxiety of its collapse.
This all makes sense from a purely theoretical and psychological perspective. But just like there's the lingering question, what if the AI doomers are right and the apocalypse is coming? There's a related question about bunkering. Because what if we really need this? What if it's the only way through? Freudian compulsions be damned. Now, go back to the guy with the island, delighted, saying there's nothing he would rather be doing. Go back to 57 giant checks written for bunkers that almost nobody visits. The Ark doesn't have to sail to work. Building it is often the treatment for the psychological ails. Noah and the flood, the prepper and his compound, humanity and our machines. The same story, over and over and over again. And that's the gentle version. Casey also gave me the dark version. What happens when the rehearsal stops being private?
There's a desire for that world, and that we may actually then set into place the conditions to make that world happen. If enough of us like fundamentally believe that the world's going to end, then we're going to govern ourselves as if we are. And then maybe perhaps we would actually do things that would deliberately induce and create that world.
If you bet against society hard enough, you help make the collapse you're betting on. The self-fulfilling apocalypse. Keep that idea somewhere handy. It comes back in a big way later this season, as does this discussion about death and the things we do to avoid thinking about it. We'll be back after a quick break. Try not to think about death too much while listening to these words from our sponsors. Thank you for sticking with us throughout these breaks. These sponsors allow us to continue making this show and, not starve while we're doing it. Your support does this too. And beginning this week, we have a new way you can support the show and actually get more out of it. Specifically, we're offering the long-form interviews with our experts that we edit together to create these episodes to all of you. So if you want to hear more from Dr. Amy Levy, Timothy Morton, the Gold brothers, any of our other experts, subscribe to our Patreon. The link is in the show notes. And we will deliver these exclusive interviews to you ad-free. Okay, back to the show. Apocalyptic thinking is everywhere. Are movies like Independence Day and Armageddon cultural expressions of the Freudian death drive? Is Silicon Valley discourse about the end of the world powered by the Freudian engine as much as it is legitimate concern? Is this podcast series and its focus on doomsday and human extinction a manifestation of my own fears? I don't know. I mean, why am I doing this? Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. We are our actions. And this episode is where everything kind of comes together. This is people taking actual action because of their apocalyptic beliefs. And look, we know, as the story says, the flood actually did come for Noah's neighbor. This is the parable about the value of preparation. But it hasn't come for ours yet. Doesn't mean that it won't in any of these various forms we've discussed. Doesn't mean that it will. It doesn't mean that AI will make it happen faster or different. But it's a possibility, and one worth exploring. One a lot of these people think worth preparing for. Whether that's upending your urban professor life and moving out to the Mojave Desert with a community of preppers, or spending a vast sum of money building an island bunker. These are people taking action because of their beliefs. This is a big part of what humans do. Should we all be doing some kind of prepping? I don't know. But I do know if there's another Carrington event, or if some AI agent decides the best way to ensure its own survival is to take us all out, and the best way to do that is to kill our electric grid in one fell swoop, Bradley Garrett and our island prepper will be feeling much better than me. Let's wrap this episode up with the big question. So this question is a question that I ask everybody at the end. Do you think AI will cause the apocalypse?
I don't know for sure. I go back and forth. Some days I think that it will never be viable. The collapse will inevitably happen. We will find out that the dreams of general intelligence are just not achievable. Right? I'm still not convinced that AI is inevitable. But then in my darkest hours, I worry about the singularity. And I worry at what point would AI recognize that the existential threat to its existence is us? And then what will it do when it realizes that humanity is actually the largest threat to the planet and its existence? Will it get rid of us? I don't know. I hope not.
Yeah, me too. I also asked Emily Ray, who we heard from in the first part of this episode. Do you think AI will end the world?
I don't want to go on record saying yes or no, because I don't want to accidentally take a prophetic role. I guess to just fully punt in my most academic way is I don't know what world ending means, because I don't know if world ending means the end of humanity, which is different from the end of the world for humans, but not end of the world for the planet. I think that AI can certainly be used as a tool that might exacerbate conditions that threatens humanity, but I don't know how exactly that would happen.
We checked back in with Emily's co-author of Be Prepared, Robert Kirsch, as well. Last question for you. What do you do to prep for the apocalypse?
I've got this one in the can. I get asked this a lot. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, they break the U.S. up into regions, right, climatologically. And based on the region you live in, they have certain recommendations. And where I live in Arizona, you can imagine that the most important thing to be ready for is to make sure you have potable water. So I make sure I have 10 gallons of potable water in my house. That's the extent of my prepping. My attitude is that if there is an apocalyptic event that renders social and political life impossible, I hope I get taken out in the initial blast. Like, make me a carbon shadow. I don't want to see the other side of this.
Speaking of the very far other side, there are people who don't just want to survive the end of the world. They want to transcend death entirely. People who look at a data center and see a life raft, not for humanity, but for consciousness itself. Bradley put it to me this way.
If we're going to preserve human consciousness in any form other than our bodies, our best bet for doing so is inside bunkered space. We're going to need to store that information. And I imagine that this is what a lot of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs are thinking about, that these data centers for AI, for instance, could maybe one day double as storage units for human consciousness.
A bunker the size of your body that stores millions of digital minds. We've come a long way since Cappadocia. Next episode, the transhumanists, the singularitarians, and the strange constellation of ideologies with a crazy acronym, TESCREAL, that wants to survive the apocalypse by becoming something other than human. If you're enjoying Suspicious Minds, be sure to follow or subscribe. And if you really like the show, make sure to rate us on Apple Podcasts and like on other platforms. If you want to learn more, you can go to the show notes where you can find links to our socials, along with links to works from our contributors. They appreciate your support, and so do we.